Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our discussion on the future of healthcare and AI. I'm Kurt Langlotz, the moderator for today. I'm a practicing radiologist who runs an AI research lab here at Stanford, and I'm director of the Stanford Center for Artificial Intelligence in Medicine and Imaging, or the AMI Center, which is proud to support this event. We have had an overwhelming response to this event. We have over 18,000 people who've registered from over 140 countries. So we're particularly glad to see all of you here today from around the world. The large audience today, I think, not only indicates a strong interest in the topic of healthcare and AI, but it also shows how interested you all are to hear from our speakers today. No lengthy introductions, so we can get right to your questions, and I'm sure they're well known to all of you, but I'd like to welcome Fei-Fei Li, who is the Sequoia Professor in the Computer Science Department and the Denning Co-Director of the Stanford Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence, or HI, and Andrew Ng, founder of Deeplearning.AI and an adjunct professor here at Stanford. Fei-Fei and Andrew, welcome.
Thank you, Kurt. Great to see both of you, Andrew and Kurt.
Always fun to have you, Kurt. I have to say, I was really looking forward to this event because actually really looking forward to hearing Fei-Fei speak. I have no idea what she's going to say today, but I was actually really looking forward to hearing it.
Well, likewise.
And it's a great combination to have both of you here together. I'm really looking forward to it. Our event today is co-hosted by Stanford High and Deeplearning.AI and supported by the AMI Center at Stanford. And I'd also like to thank everyone who worked to make this event possible today. So with that, let's get started. So Fei-Fei and Andrew, I'd like to start by asking each of you why healthcare is an important area of focus for you and your research. Maybe I'll start with Fei-Fei and then go to Andrew. So as a computer scientist, you could focus your time on many different domains, the environment, astronomy, social media, but you've made a conscious decision to take a significant part of your time and focus on healthcare. So I want to ask you what motivated you to attack this particular set of problems?
Yeah, thank you, Kurt, for asking. Indeed, I've been in the AI and healthcare research space for the past 10 years. And as far as into the future, I'm not leaving this area of research, but it actually really began deeply, deeply personal to me. So as you said, I'm a computer scientist, but I'm also a daughter who has been taking care of my mother for the past 3 decades, who is chronically severely ill. And as new immigrants to the country, as the only child of hers, I've braved every single healthcare scenarios and situations with her, from ER to ambulatory emergency to ICU to surgical rooms to long-time hospital stay to home care, just everything, you name it. And the 30 years of experience really have deepened my personal understanding of the importance of this industry to every single individual, every single family, as well as just the fundamental importance to humanity as a whole. So from that personal journey to the realization about 10 years ago, our AI technology could be of help to make healthcare better and eventually to make patients healthier, live healthier, recover better. That's why I'm here in this industry.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, it's amazing how often personal experiences with the health system can make those motivations, can drive those ambitions. Yeah. Andrew, how about you? What motivated you to get into healthcare?
Yeah, boy, personal level and professional level. Personal level, my father's a doctor. So growing up, in fact, I owe a lot of the fact that I even work in AI to healthcare, because when I was a teenager, my father was working on very rudimentary, machine learning systems for medical diagnosis. He's basically fitting two Gaussian distributions and setting some thresholds. But once a teenager, I learned about that and rudimentary neural networks from my father, and that's actually what got me into AI. But growing up in a household where every day my father would come home and tell stories about the patients he was seeing, that always inspires me. And I think professionally, several years ago with the traction in AI, having led AI teams in some large consumer internet companies, I wanted to see where we could take AI outside consumer internet. And I feel like healthcare pattern matches well for me in terms of an important social mission, as well as an industry that is AI ready, in the sense that a lot of industries will undergo digitalization first and then adoption of AI, and the Affordable Care Act, transformation of digital records, X-rays are now digital records. So all the data is kind of sitting there.
Well, thank you, Andrew. And for us in the medical school, it's obviously very rewarding to be collaborating with people like yourself and Fei-Fei. These are some of the most rewarding things that we do. So I wanted to follow up. This is a question for Andrew from Andy. Andrew, you've been a pioneer in building systems that provide real-time decision support to doctors. We see a lot of high-impact research papers showing that these systems are essentially providing expert performance near what clinicians would provide. Given the kind of performance that we're seeing, why are so few of these models in clinical use? And should we be focusing more on doctor plus AI versus doctor without AI instead of doctor versus AI?
Yeah, I think there are. I think that there are a few challenges to taking the research paper, which is peer review, including papers I contributed to and I will stand behind. But it turns out that just because someone publishes a paper showing that an AI performs at a level similar or maybe even superior to a board certified clinician, there's still a lot of work to take that into production. So all of AI, not just healthcare, I think has a proof of concept to production gap, where by the proof of concept, I mean the research paper or the model running the Jupyter Notebook. With published models where we think that turns out when we collect data from Stanford Hospital, very well-trained technicians, great equipment, and we train and test on data from the same hospital, then indeed we can publish papers showing that we're comparable to a human radiologist in spotting various conditions. Turns out if you take that same model that we just published a paper about, Kurt and I have worked on projects like this, right? Take that AI system to an older hospital down the street, older X-ray machine, technician uses a slightly different imaging protocol. That data drift causes the performance of the AI system to degrade significantly. Whereas in contrast, any human radiologist can walk down the street to the older hospital and do just fine. So I think that even though at a moment in time on a very specific data set with same train and test distribution, we can show this works, the clinical reality is that these models, frankly, still needs a lot of work to take to the production. And I think that we need to get better at bridging the proof of planning out the full cycle of machine learning project, which isn't just the modeling. It's finding the right data, training a model, deploying it, finally monitoring things, feed the data back, ensure auditing, safety, all of the things that need to be done to make it deploy beyond doing well on the holdout test set, which fortunately, unfortunately, is what we in machine learning are great at, but more is needed than that.
Do you think that problem is the same, better, or worse than other industries? Do you think that's unique to healthcare, that sort of gap that you described, or is it something that cuts across industries?
I feel like I know part of me feels like I should say healthcare is really unique, and I know healthcare is incredibly unique. I see a lot of the challenges in bridging proof of concept to production to be actually quite common across many industries. Now, there's some things in healthcare that are unique. Patient safety, there are definitely some things that are unique, but I see the problems as more similar than distinct. There is one thing that is actually very different from healthcare, which is the business and go-to-market aspect. So for any of you watching this that want to build a startup or something, I do find the business of healthcare, navigating the payer, provider ecosystem, that really is more complicated in healthcare. But from a technical point of view, a lot of the issues about having human in the loop, safety, auditing, these are absolutely critical. Privacy, absolutely critical. They are different in healthcare, but I think there may be even more similarities than differences. Yeah. That's my gut feeling. Actually, I'm curious what you, Kurt, or Fei-Fei.
Well, I think that you're right. The healthcare system is incredibly complex, and more so than many other systems. It's not as strictly capitalist as some other industries, for sure.
Maybe one lesson I've learned, those of us in machine learning, we're really good at doing well on a holdout test set, and it's a fantastic hammer, and we've built this fantastic tool over the last few decades. Unfortunately, deploying a practical system in healthcare or in other industries often requires more than doing well on a holdout test set. And I think we still need to bridge those other things that are completely legitimate things that also need to be done.
And Fei-Fei, you, I know, have faced these same issues. You've been a pioneer for ambient intelligence. And so how do you navigate the healthcare environment, facilitating cooperation with doctors, other caregivers, when it comes to obtaining the data that you need for machine learning, issues of privacy for patients and caregivers, and how to deal with perhaps the data that in healthcare isn't always perfectly accurate, maybe flawed in some ways. How do you handle those issues in healthcare? Do you think they're unique to healthcare?
Yeah, thanks. What you and Andrew were saying is fascinating, and I resonate so much. Just for the audience out there, ambient intelligence in healthcare is actually quite new. Andrew was saying that healthcare is a AI-ready industry because of the digitization, especially through electronic health record. But there is actually a unique, important space of healthcare that is not digitized, but it is fundamentally important to the human lives of patients and also the work of our clinicians. And it's actually the human behavior, whether you're talking about patients living at home, with chronic disease and hoping they never have signs of deterioration, or you're talking about doctors carrying out their important procedures, hoping that the protocols are met and there's no medical error, or just an ICU patient who is, in the bed but has a risk of safety hazard of falling or other safety issues. All this is the human behavior space of healthcare that we have almost zero data about. Nurses are asked to chart once a while, every few hours, but those charting tends to be very, very sparse and actually laborious to our nurses. So that was the space that ambient intelligence in healthcare we entered with my amazing partner, Professor Arnie Milstein from Stanford, is that we combine smart sensors and backend AI algorithms to illuminate and to see this dark space of healthcare, to see when patients need help, to see when clinicians need help, and to deliver that health critical insight into the workflow of healthcare system. And because of this technology, in fact, it's very similar to self-driving car technology. We use similar sensors and sometimes similar algorithms. But because of this technology, Kurt, you're totally right. There is a lot of human factors, right? First of all, in both the research and as well as the commercialization of this idea, how do we coordinate and facilitate with the nurses and the patients and the payers, the hospital administrators, including the physical facility partners? I think the bottom line, as you guys said, healthcare is fundamentally multi-stakeholder, and it's not driven just by capitalistic goals. It's driven by humanity as well as a business case. So we as researchers take a very, very human-centered approach by involving multi-stakeholders, from the patients to nurses to doctors to hospital administrators, into the room from the get-go to discuss the pain point and how we can make sure this technology is not just dealing with the out-of-sample performance that Andrew is talking about, but is really delivering insightful value. Yeah. And one particular question, Kurt, you asked is about privacy. And this is a really, really important question. It's actually part of the ethical design of healthcare, and in our case, ambient intelligence. Privacy, fairness, integrity of research is all part of the bigger question. So we have adopted the view actually years ago that ethical design should be baked into the technical system, not just as an afterthought. So on our team, with Dr. Arnie Milstein, we have bioethicists, we have ethical philosophers, and we have legal scholars, all from incredible Stanford, different Stanford departments working hand in hand with us. So from, for example, privacy issue, we look at the modality of sensing. Do we need RGB sensing? Can we use more privacy protected depth cameras or thermal cameras? We look at encryption or security of the device all the way to encryption of the data. We look at different learning models that would actually be much more secure, such as federated learning or different encryption methods. And then we look at how the ethics of consent in research process. And last but not the least, we look at data integrity. Data integrity involves inclusion of different patients, the fairness of data sampling, and all that. So it's really important. I think whoever works in technology and healthcare, I invite all of us to think about the ethical aspect of this technology from the get-go, because at the end of the day, healthcare is about human dignity. And the ethical design of technology speaks directly to the need of human dignity. Yes. So that's how we do it.
And do you think, this is for both of you, do you think that you can bring sort of any computer scientist with the right skills together with any physician or healthcare expert with the right skills, and that will create a team? Or do you need the computer scientist to have some healthcare knowledge, or do you need to have a medical expert that can speak the language of AI, at least, so that you have that level of communication? What do you think?
So, go ahead, Andrew.
No, go ahead. I think both sides should learn. But go ahead, Fei-Fei.
Well, yeah. So I think the first half of Kurt's question, any computer scientists and any doctors, the answer is no. I don't think that's the case. I've had numerous experiences that didn't work. I think that's exactly what Andrew said. Both sides should begin with the empathy and the willingness not to learn to be a doctor as a computer scientist, and not to necessarily learn to, coding AI as a doctor, but the empathetic willingness of understanding each other's language, of understanding each other's problem statement, and eventually align the goals is so critical. This is, brings me back to Arnie's example. He's such a senior leader when I met him. And I frankly, I hope Arnie's not mad at me if he's listening. I wasn't expecting him to learn AI coding, but his incredible willingness to learn my language, and to this day now he can even speak AI, when I'm not at the meeting. And I think this is what I tell all my students. In fact, Kurt, this is what I do pre-COVID to every student who joins Arnie and my AI healthcare team, whether they're undergrads, master's students, or PhD. I ask them to close their laptop, go shadow the doctors on our clinical team, especially ICU, if I get to choose, and just spend days to understand the human vulnerability and the human dignity and the humanity of healthcare space, and watch how tiring a nurse shift is. Watch how a doctor do his or her rounds and talk about the patients, and watch about the patients and their family members, and soak in that humanity and develop that empathy. And we come back, and then we talk about what problems we can help solving, and we develop that shared understanding of the space of the problem. So I think that empathy is the most important.
Yeah. Actually, I want to add an example. I agree with Fei-Fei. Fei-Fei's words make me reflect on. Anand Avanti, Nigam Shah, Ron Lee, we're working on a project on palliative care recommendations, and so Anand and team had built a machine learning system that would read an EHR, electronic health record, and estimate the chance of someone dying in the next 3 to 12 months. So it's a surface recommendation for a palliative care or a consultation, or to have a patient maybe filled in the advanced care directive. So as you can imagine, an AI system sending a notification, dear so-and-so, you're at high risk of dying in the next 3 to 12 months. Well, that's actually a really scary thing. And I feel like working through how to have the conversations with the patients, as well as how to rejigger the workflow of the healthcare system to, in a scalable and systematic way, respect the patient, have the empathetic conversation with the patient, or at the right point with consent of family. I mean, telling someone they're at high risk of dying, this is not an easy thing to do, because one of the really interesting things to me is in the healthcare system, without the data, it tends to be, right, the most senior doctor with the most biggest title that often makes the decision. One of the really interesting things to me with the palliative care work that the team did is by surfacing data, it actually creates space for many other people to recommend for palliative consults of patients that even the attending physician, even the doctor in charge, may not himself or herself have recommended. And so I feel like by opening up the system, which is previously very, relatively hierarchical, as the nature of many healthcare systems, many hospitals, injecting data makes it less the opinion of the most senior person, but creates space for all of the wonderful doctors, nurses, other stakeholders to say, hey, based on the data, I think we should take a look at this patient and see if we need to have this conversation with that patient. And it was really inspiring to me how the injection of these cold hard numbers actually made the system feel more multi-stakeholder and more empathetic.
Yeah, it's such an important point. And
let's empower nurses to raise for consideration if a patient needs to have this sensitive conversation, and also wound up helping deliver trainings so that more people now are qualified to have this, frankly, really difficult conversation. But I think, and I think we all have had family members that pass away under various circumstances. When I reflect on the passing of my grandmother many years ago now, I wish that there had been someone to have a conversation with her, maybe in an even slightly better way when she was in the hospital in the final period of her life. So I find it, I feel very happy that by doing these cold hard numbers stuff with AI, maybe someone somewhere could have a better conversation with someone's grandmother than maybe mine had when she was in the hospital.
데이터가 디지털화된 산업들이 AI를 더 빠르게 받아들일 것입니다. 의료산업은 단순한 진단 외에도 환자와 의료진의 행동 데이터가 갖추어져야만 AI를 실제 치료 영역에 의사 대신 투입할 수 있는데요. 아직까지 의료산업에 이러한 행동 데이터는 전혀 모인 것이 없으며 이제 막 연구가 진행되고 태동하는 단계입니다. 고도의 자연어 처리가 개발되어 의사소통이 원활해지고 진단 및 처방 정확도가 높아진다고 해서 곧바로 AI 의사가 나타나는 것이 아니라는 뜻이죠. 때문에 당장이라도 의사를 AI로 대체한다는 비즈니스, 기업에 투자하는 것은 리스크가 높습니다. 환자와 의료진의 행동 데이터를 확보하고 라벨링, 학습시키기까지는 갈 길이 멀기 때문입니다. 또 헬스케어를 비롯 AI 프로젝트를 위한 팀을 꾸릴 때 각자 자기 자신 영역만 잘 수행하는 팀은 좋은 결과를 내지 못합니다. 파트너의 전문성까지 확보하지는 못하더라도 최대한 상대 영역을 이해하려고 노력하는 팀 구성원이 필요하죠. 의사는 AI 알고리즘을 최대한 이해하고 데이터 과학자는 의료진의 치료 과정에 충분히 학습해야 합니다. 타 산업 영역에서도 마찬가지입니다. AI에 대한 이해도와 해당 산업 영역에 대한 이해도가 충분한 팀과 기업이 AI 프로젝트에서 성공할 것입니다. 시청해주셔서 감사합니다.